Great. So now that it's done installing, we're going to navigate to tutorial. That's the name of the project that we created. So we're going to navigate to that tutorial. And once we navigated there, we want to type code dot. And the reason why we want to type code dot is because we want to open it in Visual Studio Code. And well, you can open your own editor. You can open Atom if you like. You can open what is this other editor? You can open Sublime. You can open an IDE like IntelliJ. That is up to you. So I'm just going to open it in VS Code, and what you will see is that did kind of play around with this a little bit. But yeah, all you have here is this folder called Node Modules. I'm going to ignore this because this is specific to Visual Studio Code. So this is the Node Modules folder, and this is just a bunch of dependencies that allow Node.js to work basically. So you need this in order for your Angular applications to work as well. So as you can see, we have a folder called Angular here. We have Angular Dev Kit. So all these things need to be here. You'll find that when you push your code to GitHub, your Angular application to GitHub, it's going to omit the node modules folder. And the reason why it does that is because it's too big. It's very, very big. And the reason why your application is taking a long time to install when you're creating it is because of these node modules. So you want to omit that when you're pushing it to GitHub, and you only want to have the other folders. But then if you want it back, when let's say you're cloning it from a different computer, then you're gonna have to reinstall the node packages. And the reason and the way you do that is by typing npm I in that specific project, and then it's going to install all the necessary node modules. And then the next folder is source, and source is basically where your application lives. We're going to talk more about that later. I just want to go through some of these files here. And one of the files I want to go through is, I'm not going to talk about this editor config. I'm going to talk about the git ignore. So this is everything that needs to be ignored when you push to GitHub. So earlier I mentioned that this node modules is omitted when you push something to GitHub. And as if you notice here, we have a comment. So this is a comment, and we have / node modules. So these are the node modules that are here in this directory, and that needs to be omitted because it is big, right? And the other reason why you want to omit some of the files is because they're specific to the editor, like this VS Code folder here. It's being ignored somewhere. I think, yeah, that's where it's being ignored. So yeah, if you're using IntelliJ, you'll see that the idea folder is being ignored, and project class path and all these other things. So these are the things that you don't really need. And then we have these three files: angular.json, package.json, package.json. They're just dependencies and metadata that explain more about the application, the name of the application, the versions, and all those other things. So we're not going to touch this a lot unless you're configuring something, and you might have to tweak it a little bit. But in this course, we're not really going to get started. I mean, we're not going to touch any of these files that much. Another file that's worth mentioning is this readme.md. It's just explaining. As you can see, it says this project was generated with Angular, and then it says run ngserve for a dev server, navigate to whatever that the URL is, and the application will automatically reload if you change any of the source files. So it's basically explaining to you how to actually run this project, and you'll see that on GitHub. Once you push your code, it's going to show you a nice format down below of exactly the same information, right? And here we have a tsconfig. So these are just TypeScript files and dependencies. We're not gonna go over that. Another thing that is worth mentioning is, before you get started with this course, do make sure you watch a TypeScript tutorial somewhere. Just maybe go through the documentation if you have time, but I'm sure a lot of you maybe don't like reading. Then watching a video is much better. So you can watch an hour video. Don't watch a lot. Just watch 1 hour video on TypeScript. For people who know JavaScript, that would be much better because it would be a lot quicker. It's not really different. It's not too different. It's just that it's more strongly typed, if I may put it that way. It's more strongly typed in the sense that it has types. Like you specify the data type that you're using when you're creating a variable. So those are the things that you learn once you learn the TypeScript language. It's not too different to JavaScript. It's a superset of JavaScript. In fact, you can use regular JavaScript in TypeScript. So yeah, you don't really need to worry that much. So you'll see a bunch of files here. We have index.html. So this is actually your HTML page. I did mention that we're building single page applications here. And all we have, this is basically all the entire application. This app root, this is the whole application that we're going to be building. It's going to be running in the body of this HTML template, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this is the entire application. And I'm not going to go through some of these files. This is a style, nothing much here. This is where you would add like styles, basically global styles that you want to be applied in the entire application. Same goes for this main.ts, and basically this just bootstraps your your application. Nothing much about that. And yeah, yeah, you don't have to worry about that as well. This assets folder. This assets folder is where your static files are gonna live. So your images, your JSON file, JSON data, if you have any JSON files, your videos and all that type of stuff. This is where they're gonna live. So it's the static stuff that don't change. And then here we have app, and this is basically our app component. So this is the root component of your application. So earlier I did mention that in Angular, applications are stored or are built or composed of components, right? And a component is just, if I may make an example, let me just open Chrome and I'm gonna search for Amazon. Just gonna search Amazon and click on the first link. So I'm just gonna show an example of what a component is. So components are like you see in this web page, the navigation can be a component. This navigation bar, this whole nav bar can be a component, and we might want to make this a component as well. This little sidebar, we might want to make this section over here a component, and we might want to have each of these cards, or like each card, each item, we might want to have it as a component. So that's basically what it is. It's just building blocks of your application. That's all there is to it. It's not complicated at all. And they all live in one root component. So the component that has all these components into it. So this is what the app component is. So it's just a folder that contains a bunch of files. And we're gonna go through these slightly in this section, but we're gonna talk about them more in the next video. So all there is here is a CSS file that styles your component. Here we have an HTML template that has the entire application. I mean that has it has the entire HTML basically, but by default they added this CSS inside the HTML, which is pretty weird if you ask me. But yeah, this is what you get by default. You can remove all of this if you want, but I just want to show you how it looks like when we run the application. So if we go here and type ng-serve, it will run our application at localhost 4200, and that URL that is going to provide localhost 4200, we can actually type it in the browser. So let's just give it time for it to generate. I don't know why it's taking this long, really. Mm, It shouldn't take this long at all. Right, so this is what we have, and we can just click on this link and it's going to open it in the browser. It's going to open it on localhost 4200. So this is what you get by default, and we can actually remove all of that. So I'm gonna Control A, remove all this, and now we'll have nothing. Right, so this is where the entire application lives. So if we have more components, we're gonna have to make sure that we display that component here so that we can see it. So yeah, this is your root component. This is where it gets run in the body of this HTML template. So yeah, that's it for this section. And in the next section, we're actually going to start getting into coding.